previous panel and the keynote speaker, Mr. Rudranayan Pillai. They really bring the good insights and spoke about something on the network imperative, how the network as a services, how it's been reshaping. So we do understand, right, how what all covered in the previous session, as they explored the promises of NaaS as the foundation of India's digital future, how the shifting gears are there, from the vision to execution. So now let's move on. No, we have a next set of. I think so it's very difficult to fill in the shoes from the previous speakers, but we have a set of very good panelists and some of the industry leaders to come and provide their insights and their imperatives on the topic of the network imperative, right? The how network as a services, how that economic shift has been there. So without any further ado, I will like to call the panelists for the session. I'll start with Mr. Radhesh Shyam Sharma, if you can come on the podium. So Mr. Radhesh Shyam Sharma is a SVP and Head Advanced Technologies at Reliance Jio India. So Radhe has more than 2 decades of experience in the telecom sector, during which he has worked across domains spanning technology, strategy, products and solutions, market dynamics, and technology trainings. In some of the prior assignments, Radhe has worked in India, North America with technology companies, operators, and consultants. Welcome, Mr. Radhe Shyam Sharma. Shada, sorry. Okay, so sorry for the goof up with Mr. Radhesham Sarda. So next one, we have Mr. Gulshan Khurana. So Mr. Gulshan Khurana, who is an executive president with Vodafone Idea. So he's a leading engineering and planning for core networks with more than 3 decades and worked with companies like Ericsson, Oracle, and Cisco. Welcome, Mr. Gulshan Khurana. Next one, we have somebody from the infrastructure side, which is Mr. Neeraj Vyas, who's a seasoned executive at Ericsson, currently serving as the head digital business solutions for Southeast Asia, Oceania, and India. So, warm welcome to Mr. Neeraj Vyas. Next on the panel, we have Mr. Nakshatra Gupta, who is the pre-sales and solution head in the network solution and services unit at Tata Consultancy Services. With over 20 years of experience as TCS, Nakshatra has strategic leadership roles across various regions, including United States, UK, Nordics, and Australia. And his extensive background will help us to position how innovative solutions in the network solutions and service sector can bring in the network as service imperative. So welcome, Mr. Nakshatra Gupta. Last but not the least, we have somebody fluent from Sweden, especially to talk about as a global perspective on the network as a service imperative, how it is been at the global operator level. So without further ado, I would like to call Mr. Niladri Datta, who is a TMT industry executive with more than 2 decades of experience and domain knowledge in technology strategy, advisory, portfolio product management, and so and so forth. So Mr. Niladri, primarily at Virtusa, primarily responsible for building consultancy service and advisory. So I welcome to all the panelists. So good afternoon to all the panelists. I think so. What I we want to start, right? I think so. We heard the previous panelists, some of the leaders or the key speakers from the operators, from the infrastructure side, and somebody from the cloud structure side as well, speak on their perspective and how they see as NaaS being shifting from what is used to be a core, OPEX side to how it is being shifting to the CAPEX side. Now, what we have today, as we mentioned, right, we have some of the eminent panelists from the industry side, from the operator side, as well as from the network infrastructure side. So what additional that we want to see, right, the aspect of the perspective, I think so, we should be seeing unfold in this particular panel is something on the global perspective and their take on how it has been going through in the operator side from how Geo or how VI has been doing it, some of the use cases and examples, how they have been setting it. So how do I want to start is I'll like first the panelists to just at least share their thoughts, right? How they see as the shift how this shift has been taken and how what are their takes in particular in this particular topic. So I would like to start with Mr. Radhe. So Radhe ji, if you can just help us highlight, what is the take that you have on the NaaS and how it is being shifting from the heavy capex centric to that OPEX centric, how it has been the shift there.
Sure. Thanks, Sunit. Hello, everyone. So, if we look at NaaS till couple of years back, I would say that it was just like a niche basically, but now it is already becoming a scale reality. Uh, we would have all heard about the earlier NaaS services, for example, a managed Wi-Fi or an SD-WAN or a bundle of connectivity plus cloud. But now, what's new? In NaaS, what is new is basically the 5G technology, which is basically bringing a huge scale on the NaaS, supported by key technologies like 5G standalone, network slicing, edge, and URSP, the new technology, UE route selection policy, wherein a device and application can select the slice basically. So these technologies are taking NaaS to the next level, and we have already made a few slices live. For example, mission critical, FWA, mobility, and enterprise slices. In fact, um, I would like to mention that in terms of FWA, we are very close to 10 million FWA connections, and that's on a slice basically. In that form, it is a NaaS, and we have become the largest FWA operator globally. Now, coming to mission critical, if you look at the operators in US who have built a separate mission critical network, what we have done is we have done it in a much more cost effective and efficient way, and we have created a mission critical slice. And many of you would have heard about the Mahakumbh event, where there was a massive gathering, and of course all the networks got congested. But during this time, with our mission critical slice, we were able to provide uninterrupted service to the first responders like firefighters, police, and the event organizers, etc. So this slice basically had priority access and preemption facility, etc., which basically enabled uninterrupted access basis this slice. The other key important thing is, of course, the fact that NaaS is taking uh, the enterprise gate services from large and medium enterprises all the way down to the MSME level. So it's becoming reality. It is bringing digital resiliency for the country, and it is driving the economy. I'll pause here. Thank you very much.
Uh, thank you, Mr. Radhe. So, on the similar perspective, right, from the VI standpoint, Mr. Gulshan, if you can just highlight some of the imperatives, what is VI's take on particular NaaS, how they are seeing it, how they are exploring it.
So let me start by saying that this concept of network as a service is not new.
Right.
We have tried multiple options for the last 20 years, things like VNO, MVNO, etc. We thought, one infra layer could give services to various service consumers, enterprises, mobility, etc. So concept is not new. So what we see now evolving, as Radhe was mentioning, advent of 5G, etc. is coming in, FWA is being offered, replacement of optical fiber to home is being seen in form of a radio communication to home. So the change which has happened is that the economics of service offering versus the cost induced service offering is not matching. So you buy spectrum, you deploy a huge network, you put hundreds of people to manage, consume power, data center location, etc. But the revenue that you get in turn is not adequate for any mobile operator to make a healthy profit out of it. Hence, the first driver for this NaaS model is the cost imperative. How do we manage our cost by using probably a network being offered by a company, by a special purpose vehicle, who is an expert in doing that domain of business? And probably uh, multiple offerings could be built on the same in a agnostic fashion. So operator A comes, operator B comes, operator C comes, they use the same network as service model, provide some differentiation, offer to the market so that my cost goes down. This is from a mobility perspective, probably, consumer perspective. Second is the enterprises now. There are enterprises who, we see thousands of enterprises coming every year. But do they all have wherewithal to deploy a network, manage a network? It's very complex. We started from 2G in 90s, and today we are at the advent of 5G and 6G. So how do they manage this complex network of cloud within one location, data center, etc.? A kind of agnostic IP layer being built as transport. So second imperative is the complexity of the network, the management of the network. So I think these are two big drivers which we are also thinking of in this direction. But the friction that we see is that small applications, enterprises, small telcos, they'll go for this model. When we have a large requirement, when your size is 200 million plus, 300 million plus, even 400 million plus, then does it make sense to go to somebody and ask for a network as a service saying, okay, I'll use your services and offer a network to the consumers? Or the question is, I build my own infra. That is a big question. So I think it's not a straight answer saying, oh, NaaS is a better model. It could depend on what you want to offer the consumer, what are the economics involved, what is the competence capability that you have. So that's what is the dilemma going on in the market. So it's a different, it's not a single cake for everybody to eat. It's like you evaluate your own case, you say, okay, I need to give these services at this cost, with this complexity, and hence I'll go to a person who offers a NaaS service to me.
Okay, on that perspective, right? As you mentioned that as an infrastructure, how it has been difficult or how integrated can be. So I would just want to ask Mr. Neeraj Vyas, his opinion as a Ericsson, right? As an infrastructure, the leader in the infrastructure provider, and with the complexity which the network has, what is like Ericsson, as Ericsson has a view on NaaS, how they are taking it up.
So I think I'll build on both what Radhe and Gulshan stated. So NaaS is not something which is new, but at the same time, as Radhe mentioned, I think 5G really provides us a compelling event or an inflection point, because for the first time, the technology provides you the ability to differentiate the services that you provide into a vast array of consumers, whether it is a B2C to the existing mobile phone users, or whether it is enterprises, or whether it is mission critical use cases. And as Ericsson, we've always kind of said that 5G is more of an innovation platform. It's been slow to move in that direction of innovation platform, but I think it's slowly starting with FWA, with slices really coming onto themselves. But from that perspective, I think it's really a foundational building block of differentiating the services that the network can provide across different use cases. And I think we already heard a few of those use cases here. So that's point number one. The second point I'd just like to make is that the network is becoming very complex, just building onto that. And with new technologies coming in, especially AI, I think the era of being able to manage the complexity and having multiple services being rendered on the same network, it's very complex. It may look easy, but when you start to peel the layers of the stack, I think it's very complex. And with AI and a lot of the emerging technologies, I think we are moving towards a phase where networks can be autonomous, or at least to begin with, some of the use cases that we are able to provide can be autonomous, because that's very important. Because when you look at a network service being provided, you have various elements like security. How do you deal with that? With resiliency, how do you provide the 24/7 uptime that we've come to expect of any telecom service? How would you, for example, be able to monetize it from the perspective of the operators as well? That's again a very important element. Plus also from a consumer perspective, to be able to provide the right service at the right price point with the right level of customer experience. So that at a broad level is what as Ericsson we kind of think in this area.
Yeah, so on the similar side, right, we heard VI purview as well as how what Geo has been doing. So I just wanted to pass on to Mr. Nakshatra in particular, right, since he's been leading some of the global markets. So what is that change or the shift that you have been seeing globally as well? So probably both. No, I'll like to have Nakshatra go first, and then probably Niladri yourself as well. Since Virtusa is something as a globally, they have been adopted by many of working with many of the global operators. So probably Nakshatra and Ladi, just want to take your perspective on the global front, right? How it has been going.
Thanks, Sumit. See, according to the interactions that we have in the global market with our customers in the telecom as well as enterprise, see, one thing is very relevant and clear. See, NaaS means different for different people, okay? You talk to a procurement guy, for him, NaaS is nothing but a new consumption model from a telco, like pay as you go or pay as you grow. But at the same time, you talk to a CDO or a CNO, the perspective, it is an element of modernizing my network. And this perspective is same for both enterprise and telcos. So for telcos primarily, with NaaS, the service I'm committing to the enterprise, am I ready to provide that quality? Is my stack ready to handle that transparency? Am I exposing the right APIs? How about my horizontal layers? Do I have the right orchestration at the overlay? Is my underlay good enough for this? How virtualized I am? So that's a reality check. People are doing it for a while on 5G, but this is a reality check that NaaS brings to them. At the same time, enterprises, see, they regularly recycle their network kit per se, right? And then they look for a better platform which gives them better features, better enablement. So they can do it two ways. Either they take NaaS from a service provider or they do a DIY. I mean, everything they do it here, procure and do it. So eventually, it actually becomes a commercial discussion. Do I let my asset depreciate or do I do the leasing effectively? All right? But at the same time, there is an element which is still not addressed by NaaS is resiliency. From one of our, I don't know if you followed that news. Last year, Australia, one of our major telco operator went down for 2 days. All their service across wireline, wireless was down for 2 days. And one of the banking customer went to a huge loss because of it doesn't have a resiliency. It doesn't have a second operator backing that. So they always wanted to have a two in a box sort of a situation. So this is a trade-off between the resiliency and everything else. So I really don't mind getting the automation, portal-based access, but at the same time I have to secure my business. So are telcos in a state to give that confidence to the customer today via NaaS? That is one. But having said that, in Indian context, you have over 1 million SMS, small and medium enterprises here.
Right.
And then these enterprises are still underserved by the traditional model for whatever reason, maybe complexity or the cost. So bundling a beautiful NaaS package for them with connectivity, security, collaboration tools, and maybe cloud access, a very simple and affordable, it makes a very valid business case. But again, you need to, while you're coupling the services strongly, you need to decouple it a little bit on the security front, where you can manage this decoupling along with the enterprise. And just to give you a perspective, I was hearing one of the analysts last week, so adoption across the world of NaaS is still very, very low. It's under 10%, honestly speaking. And it is not the NaaS that needs to be blamed. It is also the enterprise journey where they are in their network transformation journey. So there are a couple of enterprises, not in India, even across the globe, we are still on their SD-WAN transformation journey only. So while you can build a famous, amazing, NaaS use case, okay, take my dedicated bandwidth and I'll give you IPsec on top of it, but can it be consumed by the people? So you have to be a part of the enterprise customer journeys. Where are they on their journeys on network circuits, equipments, and most important, the culture. So that's where it's a good time to be. Is it going to be a future technology for telecom? Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. So, Niladri, your take.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be part of such an eminent panel and share perspectives on both what my company believes in and what the industry is going through. So I'll take a step back and I'll, give you a bit of a history of NaaS, which I think all of us should acknowledge when NaaS was conceptualized way back in 2017 as a construct and the classic TM forum definition. We went with the proposition of exposing APIs, which every panelist, even prior to this session, spoke of, and exposing these APIs to the developer community for further consumption of services. What I kind of call it connectivity plus, so going beyond connectivity. Now, soon came another terminology, NaaS and CaaS, which is connectivity as a service. Connectivity as a service obviously focused as a subset of NaaS, and NaaS was a broader perspective. The reason why I say this, because tier one operators in Australia, UK, US, they obviously rapidly went from 5G non-standalone to standalone, where a lot of the digitization of the core happened, and therefore the acceleration of the NaaS came into prevalence, especially when you see the convergence of CIO and CTO functions. Now, since you've asked me the global perspective, a lot of the NaaS, which people haven't spoken here so far, and I want to highlight this, is not just limited to the CTO or the network function standalone. We talk of catalog-driven architecture, we talk of digital decoupled systems that starts right from the product catalog. And of course, when we talk of open APIs and orchestration of open APIs, it has to be seamless across your BSS, OSS, and networks, of course, and ops runs across. So the reason why I'm bringing this perspective is if you do not have a catalog-driven narrative to support what is being productionized at the BSS level, how are you going to operate? It is not just about availability, capacity, service quality at the resource level. It's also about substantiating and supporting that. So when you talk to global telcos, NaaS is not just a network limited imperative, it's an organization wide strategy to go beyond connectivity, A. B, it needs to be across the entire ecosystem, starting from customer, product, service, resource, all these layers as we speak. And most importantly, I think Nakshatra touched upon, is the organizational DNA, which needs to adhere to transition from being just not a connectivity player to a digital player, where you have to embrace these services, not just expose this as part of the developer community standalone, but to embrace this and acknowledge that yes, you're moving from being a general connectivity player to a technology services enabler. So that's my submission.
No, that's a fair point, right? As you mentioned, because how we have been seeing how it has been evolved. Because as an open API, now that was conceptualization and that was the initial stage. But now, something how the market has been rapidly changing, especially in the Indian context. To Mr. Gulshan Khurana, right? How the market has, we have seen the shift rapidly in the market. So how does enterprise, they balance the agility with the cost efficiency? How that perspective is, bringing in?
So enterprises is a very different ballgame because, as I said earlier, the wherewithal of an enterprise, they are specialized into doing their business. They're not network producers or they're only network consumers. Now, the imperative for an enterprise to do a startup using the services offered by a telco, to let's say manufacturing 4.0, industry 4.0, is a niche requirement. I need to do quality checks, I need to do logistics analysis, I need to do IoT tracking in my warehouse, etc. So their needs are different. They cannot rely on what a mobility consumer needs as such. So for them also, it's very important to see the cost benefit. For them, it's very important to see how does the network get managed. So I think the race of getting NaaS as a service, network as a service, would be first applicable to the enterprise segment. Later comes the consumer segment. But consumer segment is huge. Their needs are different. You have to give a mass EMBB service to a consumer. That's different. But for enterprise, needs are different. Now, one important point while I was listening to you, is that what service differentiation can I create? It's not that I'll have one network given to a couple of, like we started 2 years back, we started discussing about private 5G for an enterprise. Or we started discussing about giving a slice to an enterprise. But do I really differentiate between the enterprise needs? One enterprise might be into production purely, one might be into health services, one might be into education. The requirements of these enterprises are very, very different. So it's not simply that I'll expose my API and say my job is done. No, the latency requirement, the throughput requirement, there are multiple requirements put forward by different enterprises. Right? That's why this entire slice theory came in. So cognizant of the fact that network as service is not as easy as we talk about. For enterprises, they will do first, but they have diverse needs. A consumer might not have a diverse need. I might have a same mobility requirement on the phone as Radhe has. Right. But for enterprise, it's very, very different. And that originating from the same. So that's why this, mobile edge strategy, which was very, very much talked about 3 years back, 4 years back. Do we see any deployments today? No. Probably Jio is going with notebook now, which has all the core in the core network itself, not on the device. But otherwise, mobile at the edge did not succeed, right? So now when we see network as a service being offered to enterprises primarily, we need to be cognizant of what do they need. One guy might need a very different layer of analytics, for example. Can I give that layer similar to that to another enterprise who has very diverse needs? So I think summarizing, enterprise will go first, mobility, etc. will go later, especially in India. It could be different ball game in Portugal or Austria because there are the requirement of consumers only 5, 6, 10 million. You cannot afford to have a spectrum and a network and a data center and complete ecosystem for a 4 million consumer network. Here we talk about 200 million, 300 million, right? So enterprise will go first, my personal take. And also need to be very careful. It's not about only opening APIs to a consumer. It's about building a complete network as per the requirements, managing it, making it scalable, making it pay as you grow. And all these things have to come into the picture to make a valuable offer with a service differentiation to the enterprise.
Okay, on the similar note, right, we have seen Mr. Radhe, right, Geo has a leap and bound, how they have been offering these services, and we have seen that, first, what Geo has also brought in. So what will your perspective, how that manage, as Mr. Gulshan also talked about, right, the enterprise customers, how they have been on, especially for Indian market. So how Geo has been tackling, for especially for the uh, for enterprise subscriber, enterprise customers, like how Geo has been doing it, what are their stance and how they have been managing it, especially to balance the agility and cost efficiency.
Sure, thanks. So, building on what Gulshan mentioned, of course, the mobility and home user requirement is very different from enterprise user. Typically, a mobility or home user would just need voice data type of services, and enterprises need diverse and rich set of use cases. And again, many enterprises would have different requirements. So, across enterprises, the requirements will be different. But having said that, if we broadly classify the use cases, we can look at either a camera driven use case, which will be requiring a strong uplink, a remote control AMR AGV type use case, which will require low latency, or could be a video driven use case, which will require strong downlink. So you can potentially look into all the use cases under these three category in terms of the resource requirement. Now, second thing is enterprises also require access to certain apps when the user is at the enterprise premise. Third
Right.
is enterprise is very sensitive about data going outside the enterprise premise. So they want the data to be captive at the enterprise. These are the key requirements of enterprise. Now, the point that I'm wanting to make is if we look at private 5G, for sure, private 5G can meet all of these requirements with ease. It can deliver a low latency network, strong uplink, strong downlink, and so on and so forth. But the challenge is it will require high capex, it will require spectrum. Then, if you create a team to manage the network, OPEX will also be higher unless you go for a managed services type of model. And that is why, again, the NaaS powered by 5G network slicing and the key technologies that I earlier talked about makes a huge difference. So in slicing, what you do, you basically take the physical network and create multiple logical network out of it. And it is end to end. And I think earlier Niladri mentioned that it needs to be end to end. Completely agree, it needs to be end to end. In fact, the SLA visualization and the OSS BSS aspects also need to be embedded into it. So that's how the NaaS can meet the enterprise requirement with a slice which can dynamically scale. It will be SLA driven to meet the enterprise requirement. Now, this is how it is bringing in the key change. That is number one thing. And I mentioned earlier that we already have created multiple slices, including the enterprise slices. The key point here is with slicing, you basically get to deliver NaaS with cloud-like agility and efficiency, and you give the power of private network with simplicity of a public network.
So on the similar note, just a follow-up question, as you mentioned on the agility side and how efficiency it can be there. So, but on the stack, right, technology stack side and architecture, so which you believe this is the most suited and scalable to secure these NaaS solutions?
Thanks, Sunit. So on technology stack side, one thing that is absolutely clear is NaaS will require differentiated connectivity. Now, how differentiated connectivity will get enabled in our perspective, it is basically the 5G standalone, and the key technology drivers are, of course, slicing being one, the edge being the other. Of course, sometimes you need low latency and therefore you need to bring the network closer to the user. And the next step that I earlier talked about is a URSP or UE route selection policy, which today is supported by iOS or Android ecosystem. And that will actually bring NaaS to consumer use cases as well. Of course, it will come gradually, as Gulshan mentioned earlier. Now, these are the key differentiating technology aspects of NaaS. And I mean, again, if we look at NSA flavor of 5G, non-standalone 5G, it can give basic priority differentiation. It is not able to give an end-to-end differentiation that would probably be required to deliver a good NaaS service. That is number one thing. Second, I would also like to touch upon the fact that security is a very key aspect of NaaS. And again, if I look at 5G standalone here, the user identity. So in case of, again, 5G non-standalone, the user identity in the initial transaction goes in clear text form because it inherits the vulnerabilities of 4G. But in case of 5G, the very first handshake happens in an encrypted format. So if we look at fake cell tower or IMC hacking, they have become the things of past from a 5G standalone perspective. So with 5G standalone, security also comes paramount. And on top of that, I mean, I'm again going back to what Niladri mentioned earlier, a very strong OSS BSS subsystem which can orchestrate the slice that would be required as part of the technology stack.
So as Ladi also mentioned, as he also highlighted, right? So on the OSS stack system, so probably I'll like to take that point nearest to you, because as Ericsson, right, the core technology stack that sits with Ericsson. So what you believe, what are the technology stacks, architectures that you believe can for the NAS solutions in particular that can be scalable?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a very, very pertinent question. One is the outside in, what gets delivered, but what's actually needed. And let me just summarize this context in three different points. I think the first is we see the operator stack going from a vertical architecture to a horizontal architecture. And this is across different network functions. I think moving to cloud native, functions are shared, they are modular, and you just build on it. You don't rip and replace things, but you build on it. So the first point is actually moving from a vertical architecture to a horizontal cloud native centric architecture. The second very important element is I think the networks are moving from static to autonomous. So for example, we now have elements where you have AI that's embedded inside the network. So as you create and differentiate services, I think it's very important to, and I think many panelists mentioned SLA and quality of service, etc., including resiliency. I think it's really important to be on top of it, to be proactive rather than predictive. And that's where a lot of a lot of elements of the intent-driven architecture come in. For example, if you look at TM Forum and 3GPP, they've all been talking about intent-driven architecture. How an intent at a business layer where you define a service, how it moves from the business layer to a service layer and a resource layer, how that intent moves, and then there could be multiple intents within the same network, all contending for the same resources. So how the conflict management of that happens as well. And that from an architecture perspective is an extremely important element. The third important transformation shift in the technology stack is moving from being a closed ecosystem to an open ecosystem. And that's where the entire API economy comes in, because a lot of these capabilities of the network, whether it is differentiated services, whether it is location, whether it is able to provide a second level security or an authentication for a business application, how do you expose all those capabilities to the upper layers? And that's the entire piece about the API and everything. So you are basically opening up your network to different business applications, to developers, to system integrators, so that communication and telecom technology and all these telecom services, they don't remain outside the boundary of the application, but they come inside the application boundary, and that's where they're embedded, and they make use of not just the connectivity, but a lot of the other things that the network can provide, including location, security, authentication, and all of that. So it's those three different transformations that we see that's happening across all the telecom operator stack. And the good thing is it's happening in an incremental manner. You're able to build onto it. It's not a rip and replace. And as we move from today 5G to 5G advanced to 6G, I think it's very important that the industry takes care of the fact that you build on, and it's modular and it's extendable.
Okay, on the similar note, right, Niladri, as you mentioned, right, earlier, so just one question, as Neeraj just highlighted, just what I wanted to understand, or what will be very good as a thought from your side is, what are the other, some of the NAS accelerated the rollout for the digital initiatives, that is like Industry 4.0 or the telematics, right? So what are what ways NAS can accelerate some of these sectoral digital initiatives?
I'll just, it's me to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's to you.
all right. I'll just build on what Neeraj said because I think it's a very important proposition to also look at it from the realization of what it takes for vendors, solution providers to implement. And I'll just build on the point that he said. So when you look at OSS and networks, it's completely converged. The lines have completely been blurred. Therefore, the horizontalization of OSS. Therefore, if I unpack this whole OSS production fabric, it starts obviously at the element management layer, and then of course you have the VNFs and the CNFs. Most importantly, one of the critical ingredients in all of this is the centralized production fabric, which is empowered by unified data fabric. The unified, we spoke of resiliency, we spoke of security, but we must also acknowledge the unification of data is paramount. So you can't have uncorrelated data coexisting in your ecosystem with a variety of disparate inventories all over the place and trying to roll out NaaS and expect your availability and capacity to be seamless. That's a challenge. So what I'm trying to say is 3 submissions. A, the unification of data fabric has to be empowered and backed up by cognitive automation, analytics, and AI. We talk a lot on AI and a lot of AIification, but we often forget that AI is fundamentally based on data, and data has to be federated, and unification of data is paramount to ensure this OSS stack supports the productionization of any kind of NaaS use case at the last mile. Point number 2, when you look at the overarching theme of autonomous networks, which is an accelerator to the NaaS, and NaaS is fundamentally based on the principle of autonomous networks in many ways, you will have to look at it in 3 different dimensions. You have to look at it from pure cognitive automation dimension, you have to look at it from an analytics dimension, and you have to look at it from an AI dimension, which is not just agentic, but it's also, to the point that my fellow panelists made earlier, near the edge, and distributed AI and edge AI will have an equal say when you want to commoditize 5G and moving towards to 6G. And the last point, we often forget the importance of embracing this entire thing about the culture, because you need a mindset shift of the people who are implementing this at a ground level. The coexistence of old and new in terms of product portfolio. You'll see always a private 5G very successful. You'll always see a very great success of an autonomous car with, some of the leading OEMs and the automobile manufacturers. You'll see a one-off digital e-health use case. You'll always see a very successful fintech service. But the problem remains scaling up. And that's where the mindset shift has to happen. It is not just the mindset of the operator at large, it's also the vendor mindset, the ecosystem partners who are all party to this. So these would be the imperatives to take any industry 4.0 or any industry 5.0, what I call as B2B or B2B2X. That X can be any industry, whether it's healthcare, automobile, retail, manufacturing, doesn't matter, to make it a reality and to scale it up. And I'm hopeful as an industry person being part of this ecosystem that with advanced 5G and with 6G, we will see this commoditization not as a distant dream, but a reality.
Okay, thank you on that perspective, Niladri, right? Just but as a perspective, right, with Nakshatra, you brought in earlier, especially on the network resiliency, right? So something as a perspective, what do you see as a traditional, right? As we started, like how traditional as a capex driven model, right? Telecom to business model into this OPEX service model, right? So how you see as a particular, NaaS reshaping, right, from keeping that the network resiliency is also there. So what you see as what is there? I think so. TCS, right? You have been working both in the Indian markets as overseas market as well. So how you have seen this shift, and how NaaS is reshaping it?
Yeah, valid question. See, traditionally we see telecom operators as the builders. They lay cables, they have huge data centers, they set up base stations, and they are the owner of their networks today. And see, this has worked in the past across generation refreshes from 2G to 3G to 4G and 5G, basically for voice and data, okay? So every cycle starts with the capital outlay and then it ended up with a depreciation chart. But then in this digital economy and probably the AI ecosystem of future, there is something fundamentally different that they need actually agility, they need flexibility, and they need programmability. So that is where NaaS is actually the cornerstone for this transformation. So if I call it initially, the ownership were valued, but in today's world or in future, they don't reward ownership. They actually reward orchestration. So can you orchestrate a service for me which is relevant for me? I really don't care about your ownership of your network. So that is where the model shifts, okay, from a capex to a capability as a service. I will not say it an opex. It will be probably a combination of opex and capex. But from a traditional monolithic capacity, you are not selling, you are now selling the service innovation. So again, the simple example is if I need to branch out a new branch as an enterprise, I really don't need to take the pain of procuring everything. I can actually use the NaaS service for connectivity combined with quality of service and security together, and it should be as simple as spinning a cloud instance, right? So that's where you shift the model, Sumit. And then secondly, one most important point, telecom operators sits on a lot of data. When you say a lot of data, in terms of identity, usage patterns, location, and now with NaaS being so open, you are actually exposing these APIs to the world, right? And then using Kamara APIs or GSMA Open Gateway, you are giving this access to a developer community. So now even developer community can create some wonderful applications on your ecosystem. At the same time, you have an enterprise using your APIs to completely automate their connectivity profile. And you being operator is sitting as an orchestrator with flexibility and profitability, right? So having said that, this is where the fundamental shift is happening from a capex driven model to a capability driven model.
No, that's a good point, what you highlighted from a capex to capability driven model. But as you highlighted, right, the APIs, how it's been the Kamara and the GSMA open gateway APIs, how it's been exposed to networks. So probably, Neeraj, right? So in particular, what kind of other development ecosystems that we should see, right, on top of the NaaS solution platforms?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very interesting perspective, and that's a problem that we've kind of at Ericsson kind of thought about. So, for example, you have 400 networks globally. Let's assume they start exposing network capabilities via APIs. An application provider, let's assume, and I think let's for example assume Microsoft Teams. Does Microsoft Teams go ahead and integrate with those 400 different operators? How do they provide mobility? And I think we as Ericsson last year, what we did is we launched an API aggregator company, that's Aduna. I think all the panelists here, from the operators, they're a part of the founding members, of that initiative. But what that initiative basically does is it aggregates the APIs in a very standardized format, integrates with Kamara, integrates with TM Forum, standardizes it, so that as an application provider, one application provider need to integrate once with that API aggregator, that's Aduna, and then that application works seamlessly. So for example, if Microsoft Teams, for instance, and this is the reason I take that example again and again is because it's a dream. Because for all of us, when we get onto Microsoft Teams, we are in a car, we are on a road, the call invariably drops. Or I try to say something, important point, others are not able to hear. Wouldn't it be really fantastic that as business users, the minute you switch on a Microsoft Teams call and to the URSP point, automatically there's a selection made that you are being assigned a higher bandwidth, a lower latency, so your call never drops. And for that to work seamlessly, I think, that to me will encapsulate all the elements of whether it's the technology, the API, and all of that will work and come together to actually deliver that. But that's the basic point. Aduna is that framework that we launched. We understood the problem, which aggregates all these APIs and exposes it. And at the moment, maybe I can give you a quick update on the progress. There are 4 categories of APIs that we've launched there. The first one is differentiated connectivity, quality of service on demand. There's location. There is 2-factor authentication. And then there is a mission critical secure slice. So something that is very, very secure that can be used across a different variety of use cases. And these are cluster of APIs that are there, that are available to use. The first set of use cases in production should actually come out very, very soon from some of the operators around this. But that, in my way, will go a really long way forward to actually, bring a lot of these services to life, to get the application developers, the system integrators, the hyperscalers, and everybody involved in this huge growth that can happen once those network capabilities are available to the developer community.
No, probably I think so. We are coming to the end of the time for the session, but as the perspective that you clearly mentioned, something as a platform, right, between the cloud provider as well as the network operator. So probably as a closing remarks or no, or as a conclusion, something that I can start with Mr. Gulshan Khurana, right? So what do you believe, as a telecom operator and cloud providers, how they can create a win-win, situation for a NaaS partnership?
Thank you. Before I make my comment on your question, I was listening to Nakshatra and Neeraj both. The network telco operations job in India is a very difficult tightrope to walk. You said I'll expose my APIs, we'll give services to consumers. The only thing I have is data which is in abundance with me. For every service being offered through an open API or through NaaS as a service or through a slice, the security is my responsibility. The data protection is my responsibility. Interception is my responsibility for the government of India. Keeping IP records is my responsibility. Regulatory compliance is my responsibility. And at a cost that you pay every month to me, which is minimalistic, lowest in the world, right? So this becomes a very complex ecosystem for me, because then managing all these 5 things which I mentioned earlier, for a voice call that gives me zero revenue and probably data which is the cheapest in the world. So, building a captive network or going to somebody else and asking for NaaS as a service, network as a service, it's a complex system. So it will not be as easy as opening up my APIs for somebody like Aduna to come in and start consuming services. We need to see how security is built in and all. Sorry, I forgot your question again.
No, so as you mentioned,
I
I
was
think
so
so
engrossed
something
in-
that you just mentioned about win-win partnership that will be created.
But maybe on that point, Gulshan, I completely agree to the challenges there. I'll just replace my with us. So we are together with you to solve those problems and challenges.
So
So
I
be
think so
rest
you
assured.
just have answered the question, as a win-win situation ship for both operators and the
Beautiful camaraderie between.
No, absolutely. I think so. Before we open the questions to the audience, so any last closing comments from your side, Niladri? As perspective what we covered,
You're asking
Nakshatra.
me?
Yeah.
All right, I think I already have made a lot of pointers which I had to make. The only thing I want to quickly wrap it up by saying, as much as Gulshan and Neeraj were having this, funny interchange, I was wondering what is the regulator doing. So I think I would take maybe a submission to the regulatory bodies, especially not just in India, in all markets where the regulation is pretty conservative. And I think deregulation has to pave the way, and it's not just the operator who takes the whole ownership, Gulshan, as you mentioned. I don't know how many of you did hear the community at Mobile World Congress, both in 2024 as well as in 2025, where major European operators came at a forum, and I'm talking CEO levels, all CEOs, and they humbly requested European regulations to completely open up the market in many ways. Europe is perhaps the most conservative as far as adoption of 5G standalone migrations are concerned, primarily because of regulation and regulatory pressure. So it's not, the onus is not just on the vendor, which is the supply side, or the operator, the demand side. The contribution must come from each and every entity in the value chain, and each has to own up the combined responsibility to make the industry a place to thrive, so that all of us can be happy and the economics of sanity can exist.
No, no, absolutely. So, Nakshatra, anything from your side, or rather in particular, right? What we just saw Gulshan and talk about. So probably from especially from Jio's standpoint, what is any that you believe, how other things that how can it work as a closing that you want to talk about?
Thanks. No, I think Gulshan made a very good point. But as a closing, I'd like to just share a very clear perspective. First of all, if you look at 5G, and I'm sure that all of us would remember the ITU triangle, right? EMBB, URL, CMMTC. So 5G is actually born to be serving NaaS, because this is all about differentiating connectivity. Second thing I mentioned in the beginning is that, it is no longer a niche, it is a scaled delivery as of now. From a managed service model, it has become a platform of innovation. Now, the key point that I'm wanting to make is it definitely started with enterprises, the large and medium enterprises. Now it will flow down to MSMEs. In India, we have more than 6 crore MSMEs. And the way it will work is basically you think about what MSMEs need. They need connectivity, they need security, storage, and a set of productivity apps. So an FWA bundled NaaS could easily serve the purpose. And beyond this, it will flow down to consumer, and that will be made enabled by URSP, as I mentioned, already supported by iOS, Android. So in other words, I can clearly see that NaaS would serve across all the layers, whether it is enterprise, MSME, or consumer, whether it is about mission critical first responder for disaster relief type of scenario, build digital resiliency, and drive economy. In all these perspective, clearly NaaS will play a key role in 5G, and going forward in 6G also, more advanced services will be built, which will all be delivered through NaaS. So this is what I would like to say.
Thank you, Adiji. Nakshatra?
Yeah, I think, see, the future, as everybody says, is going to be NaaS for the people. And see, understand, it took 7 years to build these NaaS APIs or the framework per se. So you have to wait for another couple of years to get the NaaS popular. But again, it is going to be collaborative. What you expose is up to you. Based on that, you will get the exposure to the enterprise. But who sub, telco operators prime, and the equipment vendors sub to them, it's a separate discussion. But what enterprise is looking is very clear. They're looking for trust and transparency. So as a NaaS bundle, I may be the prime. I may be buying from Neeraj, then Gulshan, and then probably Sumit to give you a complete bundle to the enterprise. However, what is the transparency level that I can provide to the enterprise? I may be transparent in what I do, but I may not have access to what Neeraj systems are doing to my ecosystem. So customers are looking for that end-to-end transparency and trust because they are trusting you with their business. If I exaggerate it, they are actually trusting you with their life. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Nakshatra. So I think so we got few minutes. So if we have any questions or any perspective from the audience.
Hi, thank you. That was a very insightful discussion. I am Dipankar. I'm part of Telstra. I basically lead the generative AI services there internally. And my question is pretty direct. Do you think hyperscalers are better positioned to monetize NaaS APIs than telcos?
So, Niladri, you want to take that from the Telstra perspective?
So both yes and no answer, okay? So yes, because of the sheer scale and a better awareness of the infrastructure, especially when you look at NaaS, a lot of OEMs started this journey a little late compared to when you look at cloudification of the network per se, right? And certain solutions, especially powered by the Tanzus of the world or Microsoft Azure's for Nexuses of the world, actually paved the way for network cloudification faster, smoother, and showed the OEMs to follow the same suit. The present situation, this was the no answer. So why, I think that hyperscalers are better positioned. So it's a tick for the hyperscalers. Why no? No, because with due respect to the hyperscalers, the domain depth that is required for a seamless operations, for a slice to get orchestrated across customer, product, service, resource, is not present at the hyperscaler level. You will need a system integrator, you will need a OEM to give you that domain depth, and more importantly, the operator to give you that operations know-how to deploy that at scale. So hyperscaler obviously can give you the cloud infrastructure, can help you disaggregate. What next? How are you going to stitch a particular slice right from the customer product catalog down to the services, compliant to the SLAs, maintaining data sovereignty, cloud sovereignty, maintaining the resiliency of the network, and then deploy it. And more importantly, operate it at scale, not compromising on the SLAs and the SQMs at the last mile. So that's why I said both yes and a no answer. I do not think hyperscalers are yet there to replace the domain depth of many, many years, both for system integrators as well as OEM players, and they can. That's the reason they work as partners. Otherwise, we would have been all replaced by hyperscalers.
So hope that answered your question. So
Maybe I'd just
You want
like
to
to
put- yeah, sure.
add to that. I don't think it's a question of either or. I think it's a question of collaboration, because the way the technology stack is moving from, let's say, vertically integrated to a horizontal stack, I think it's more a question of collaboration. And I see, operators and hyperscalers collaborate, whether you have an on-prem cloud or whether you have an off-prem cloud. I think it's a moot point, but I think it's a question of collaboration. And absolutely to what Niladri said, the kind of intricacies in the network, the autonomous network, the way you provision differentiated connectivity and provision slices and provision customers onto those slices, that's something which is very, very inside of how a telco manages its business. So it's more a question of cloudification, and in my view, hyperscalers are one element to support the virtualization journey and the massification of capabilities. That's my point.
Thank you, Neeraj. I think so. As you mentioned, right, and as the panelists all of you discuss about how how quick to the market or adoption for NaaS particular to be agility, right, and flexible, especially for the self-driven, so that the adoption, how quickly it can be in the market, and how agile and how easy it can be, especially for the SMEs or for the enterprises. So that really brings out that perspective. So I think so.
We
Is there
have
any
one
other
more
questions?
question, Sunit.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Anjali Goyal from S&P
Can you
Global.
keep the mic closer, please?
Yeah. Okay. Hello, I'm Anjali Goyal from S&P Global. So I have a question on security. So Neeraj, he was talking on the API market that Ericsson has built a app which is related to API, and then it could help in translating the various layers, like where it is a transparent communication and all the if it's an application of Microsoft, so you can get a call and then you will get that transparently that, okay, latency is reduced and all those things. So on the security part, the sir who was just sitting adjacent to Neeraj sir, so he mentioned that it is not so easy. So I just wanted to ask on that is it like the APIs which Ericsson is working on, there are a lot of players in the API market, but is it are we really able to connect all the platforms and provide all the security? Because there are a lot of DORA thing and a lot of security issues which are coming in. So are we really able to do the handshakes between different players and then really encash it and make all the transitions so easy? Or we are really working and there is a roadmap for it?
So probably before Neeraj, just wanted to highlight this point, right? As I think Neeraj also highlighted the Kamara and specifically the GSMA, how they are integrating those open API gateways, right, to have the standardization. So probably that also brings in that security aspect, so that everybody has a common platform where all the security checks and controls has been done. But as we understand, right, how the technology stack and how it has been more fundamentally the complexity that is gaining through. Yes, there are challenges on the security side. So Neeraj, you want to
Yeah, but I'll answer your question very, very simply. Security, is it important? Absolutely. One of the most important things out there. Can the technology provide the security? Absolutely, it can. Are we there yet? I think there are lots of things under evolution and development, but the end goal is a zero trust architecture, and that's Ericsson, and that's all the operators, when they put a demand on us, they put a demand on zero trust architecture. So you don't trust anything either inside of the firewall or even outside of the firewall. So various elements where you can actually create security on an end-to-end basis. Different constituents need to have various elements to provide that security. It needs to have a handshake between each of the individual elements for it to be able to provide end-to-end. But absolutely, that's critical and important. And we have various implementations and various levels of that already exist even today.
Thank you.
Okay. I think so. We had one more question. Okay, two. So there's one question in the front. So this gentleman in second row, yeah.
Hi, I'm Sharnava Rai from Virtusa and earlier Ericsson.
If you can keep the mic closer, please.
Yeah, my question to Niladri. So you mentioned about the need to evolve and the organizational DNA and changing from and making the changes across network, OSS, and BSS layers. While NaaS is positioned for top line growth, the imperatives, as we understand from this discussion, the imperative on the OPEX are very high. So the question is, how does this impact the operational challenges and the efficiency that we have, and how do we manage those challenges without increasing a lot of OPEX?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question and a very important one. At the same time, the answer would be multifolded. So you have to bear with me. See, when you look at operations, at least when I look at operations, I look at it at three levels. I do not look at operations as a tactical differentiator of cost to improve efficiency. That is a hygiene thing, which all of us talk about. So when you talk of operations, you will obviously be looking at KPIs and SLAs. Now, these KPIs have a multifolded approach. And what you should do is, because your business model is changing from being a monolithic, as Nakshatra also mentioned and several other people mentioned, the fundamental is top down. So your strategy is changing from being a monolithic demand supply led equation to a platform driven ecosystem where the convergence is happening thick and fast. So you're aiming towards a platform driven business model, which is ably supported by a platform architecture, which is ably supported by an operations which also needs to be seamless. So when you're looking at KPIs and SLAs, you have to multi-dimensionalize it to start from the operational level KPIs, round it up to a service level KPI, and then further round it up to a business level KPI. So when you look at NaaS, especially when you look at the tactical KPIs to support NaaS, they are not just at operational level, or they should not be at only operational level. They should look at your service level impacts, which is going to tremendously impact your brand, the SLA at the last mile that you're delivering a service, and most importantly, the fundamental three things on revenue, customer experience, and CSAT, which is your top level CXO KPIs right at the business level. So every NaaS or a service that you're delivering at the OKPI level has to round up to a service KPI level, and further has to be rounded up to a business KPI level. That should be your approach. And that is how the NaaS is not just a fundamental network only strategy, it's a business and organization wide strategy. That would be my answer.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
probably we can
Thank
just
you.
take a last question there because we are on time, and I think so. The gentlemen are there for the next 2 days as well. So anybody wants to connect with them, I think so. Most of them are there in the booth, or they're happy to answer the questions. But we can take the last question, sir.
Yeah, just for better understanding. So if there's a current network and the company is moving to NaaS, will both of them coexist, or the earlier network system will totally go out and only NaaS will be there? And is it totally cloud-based? And second part, what would be the, I know it's difficult to give an exact number, profitability of NaaS versus the existing network in terms of bottom line? Right. Just wants the panel's views on that.
So Gulshan, you want to take that specifically? Okay, so I think so there are two parts of the question that the gentleman is asking. The first part is particularly on, will NaaS replace the traditional network? If I understand it correct.
Totally.
Yeah, and tomorrow, like going forward, so if NaaS will replace the traditional network, and how in harmony NaaS and the traditional network can work hand in hand, what will be the take? How do we see that as a
And
future?
second part is the profitability of
Profitability.
traditional versus
There's
NaaS.
the NaaS profitability.
I think while I was doing a mental preparation for this session, I was thinking whether this question came to my mind as well, whether it's going to replace, it's going to be a hybrid approach. There's no one size fits all. There'll be traditional communication to a consumer, which is tightly coupled, which has big security aspects. They still be maintained. So one big problem today, as a question there was in hyperscaler as well, do they have a reach? Do they have a spectrum? No. Ultimately, consumer has to be served by a guy who has spectrum available, who is close to the consumer. I've got base stations. I've got edge locations. I've got data centers. Hyperscalers have a very limited, footprint. They mastered the art of, scalability. They mastered the art of giving service as you grow. They mastered the art of, network management and lifecycle management. But ultimately, consumer needs service from a base station standing and giving, airwaves to your phone. So I think it's not a question to easily answer saying, will it replace it? No. I think for a long time, I do not know what will happen 20 years from now, but for a very long time, captive networks are going to give service to you. Gradually, you will see network as a service available to you for enterprises first, small telcos later on, large telcos after that. This is my view. It's going to go in that. And profitability, absolutely must. Technology is available today. Economics does not make a sense today. And as long as economics does not make a sense, nothing can be, served to a consumer. So I think technology, economics both have to go hand in hand, and there will be a gradual approach from enterprise to a small telco to a larger telco to a complete bundle of bouquet of services being given to a consumer.
Can I challenge you very quickly on the last part in terms of when you're saying profitability? So it may happen that competition comes in with NaaS and gives better CSAT and better service and all that, and the top management board starts getting worried. Okay, profitability is slightly less, but we don't want competition to take away market share. So what would be your thought on that?
I think, again, the same answer applies to this question also. It will be a hybrid approach, and also what comes tomorrow. You will have a satellite communication coming and replacing everything. I don't know. Will it make technical sense, economic sense? I don't know what will happen. But today, looking at the situation, the complexity which has evolved in the last 10 years, 15 years, completely cloudified core networks, cloudified kind of transport networks, RAN also going to now cloud. So I think things are evolving at a very fast pace. We'll have to wait and watch. But as I said earlier, I think segments of enterprises who need specialized services, specialized kind of treatment, but do not have the wherewithal to deploy a network on their own, they will go first for NaaS, followed by people like us who will probably have a larger volume and a kind of service being given. So this will be a gradual path to be covered.
Just a 20-second addition to which you asked me. See, it will coexist as Gulshan said. So it's a hybrid approach, completely agree. You look at any Western operators who are deploying NaaS, right? Single line voice and circuit switch still coexist. Pick up any operator, UK, US, Europe. Nobody has gotten rid of their voice services. They're still making substantial money. And when we go and advocate, they said, not touching, no circuit switch rollback. Circuit switch will exist along with all the VoLTE and packet switch. So there'll be coexistence, no doubt about that.
Just adding a bit on this, I think some of the requirements which will be very specialized will continue to be served as a private network going forward. If we talk about the factories of future, factory automation, those kind of stuff which will require very low latency, and therefore you must have to deploy all the network infrastructure at the premise. Those kind of requirement where you will have, let's say, a smart vision where you need a lot of uplink, and therefore your spectrum must be split differently from the public network. Those type of use cases would probably be served with a private 5G, but number of use cases would basically come as part of NaaS delivered by slicing. So I agree with all my fellow speakers that it will coexist basically. Yeah.
No, I think so. With that beautiful thought from all the speakers, I think so. It's a privilege for being leading this panel and moderating this panel with the eminent speakers. But thank you to all the panelists, for their insights and their perspectives or the global shifts, and how we see as the India market how it's been shifting, especially from the geo side, how they've already been there. From the global perspective, from Niladi and Nakshatra, how they have been seeing in the European and the UK markets, other markets globally, especially from the network side of things, how Ericsson and how other network operators, how they have been doing, what a network technology stack that has been developing, and especially from VI side, right, as a global operators, and especially from the VI, how they have been operating in India. So probably that is a very intriguing and very insight that was given by all the panelists. So thank you for all the panelists for the session and providing their insights. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Sunit, and to our respected speakers. As this is the end of the session, I request Mr. Sunit Kumar to distribute the token of appreciation to all the speakers from IMC. Thank you.